Thank you very much indeed to Sophie Deckers from EasyJet and Rob Griggs from Airlines UK for joining us today. Matt Weston is going to open the questions.
Sophie Deckers, if I could just start with you, could you just talk through, for our benefit, your approach to dynamic pricing at EasyJet?
Yeah, certainly. So we were established 30 years ago, and our model is basically to fill all our aircraft. So since we've been established, we have always used dynamic pricing. We carry 100 million passengers a year. Our first flights that we operated was Luton, Glasgow. We charged $29.99 back 30 years ago, and we advertised it the same as the price of a pair of Levi's. You can still fly Luton to Glasgow today for $29.99. I don't think you can say the same for the Levi's, unfortunately, with air passenger duty included in that now. The way that the prices work is we offer the ticket price. If you book it earlier, it's generally the cheapest time to book, and then as demand grows, the prices typically go up closer to departure, and that's the typical way that dynamic pricing works. It's the same as all aviation typically, and has been for the last 40 years. In terms of adding then additional charges in there for booking a seat or a bag as you go through the booking flow, that's an optional extra for people. About 40% of people, in fact it's 39% of people in the last year, have chosen not to add any extras, and therefore the price that you pay at the very beginning when you're searching for your flight is the price that you then pay at the checkout. As an airline, typically where the most demand is where the prices do increase more than the rest of the year, and overall our margin last year, including all the ancillaries and in-flight retail, was £6.08 per passenger. So it's a very low margin industry typically as well. And it's very competitive. So in Europe and in the UK, there are 89 short-haul airlines operating. So everything is highly competitive and people have choice.
And how do you use algorithms, AI, whatever, to price the flights? Do you use also information about the consumers that are on the interface looking to book a ticket? And do you actually take history from that consumer so that may impact on the price that they pay?
The algorithms, we absolutely use algorithms because of the size and scale of our operation and the number of flights we have on sale at any one time. The algorithms work on how much we historically sold those flights for and how many seats were booked at how many days to go. So that is the way the algorithms work. The way they don't work is they don't track individuals, they don't look at cookie data, they don't cache any data at all. So we don't price differently depending on when you looked at the flight, when you booked a flight, what you've booked previously. It's all based on taking that individual flight, how much sold at what day, we call it days to go, in advance of the journey for that individual flight, not for the customer. So let's take the Luton Glasgow example. We would say, let's say we put it on sale 365 days out. As it gets closer to departure, something like a Luton Glasgow would have quite a late booking profile. Typically domestics book within the last 14 days, so you'd probably see quite low prices, and then the prices will go up closer to departure. And that would be the same pattern if you looked at it last year, the year before, the year before. So the algorithms work on the historical booking profile, but not on the individuals that are booking.
Well, Griggs, how does it work, representing the industry, how does it work across the industry? Is it exactly the same as that, or are there variations to it?
There are variations to it. So
examples.
Yeah, so there's, I think, as Sophie said, some form of variable or dynamic pricing has been around for a number of decades, and it's kind of gone hand in hand with the liberalisation of aviation, which has brought significant benefits to consumers. I think traditionally you would have a number of predetermined sort of static price points, usually starting lower. They would get higher as you go towards the flight, and essentially you might have a number of buckets of tickets. And once one bucket of tickets has been sold, you'd move to a higher price point. And as far as we understand, a number of airlines still operate that sort of more historic model, which is less perhaps dynamic, with a lesser or greater degree of sort of human intervention as to see if a route is under or overperforming, for example. But as Sophie said, fundamentally, whilst there might be changes, all airlines will price differently, have their own strategies, but the idea of essentially aviation is a low margin, high volume industry, so filling the aircraft and making sure that the algorithms are dynamically doing that is broadly what happens across the piece.
Okay, but the point I was just asking about purchase history, browsing history,
yeah.
Personal data, other carriers would use that, wouldn't they?
No. So that appears to be a popular misconception about how dynamic pricing works. So fundamentally what the algorithms are looking at is there are a number of variables, but it's how well those tickets are performing, how much they're being sold, at what rate. They are not looking at private information. Someone said, I read online that someone said, someone was served a higher price ticket because they were browsing via a latest iPhone. I mean, that doesn't happen categorically within. I can speak for UK Airline, our members, not for the whole global airline community, but as far as we're aware, it's a myth. It doesn't actually happen.
Okay. And then there's a bit of a running joke amongst consumers that you go onto a site and it says 2 left against that particular seat. It's always 2 left. What's that about?
We were talking about this. I mean,
it's basically designed to. It's the sense of missing out, isn't it? And that's why airlines do it.
Well, I think there's a balance to be struck here, because there's 2 left because there's 2 left. And as I said, you have these essentially buckets of tickets, and people will say, look, I went on and I looked, and then a few hours later the price might have changed. And that may well have changed because there were only a couple of tickets. Now, by letting people know there are a couple of tickets, arguably that's transparency to help the consumer make the decision. You can look at it the other way and say, that's encouraging people to buy. But it is a balance there, and it very much is. As I say, the price points are there. Once they are sold, the prices may move. That's the nature of dynamic pricing.
Thank you, Cooper.
Thank you, Chairman. Sophie, if I could begin with you. And I'm a huge fan of the model. I use budget airlines all the time, and I actually commuted for 10 years between Scotland and Ireland using yourselves and some of your rivals. But why do you pile on so many extra charges? Why are your prices sky high as well as your aircraft? And you talked there about 40% of people don't pay these extras, but that means 60% of people do.
For us, the whole model, and the reason we established the low-cost airlines to give people choice, and that's why we don't put the extras on for everybody. Because if we put the extras on for everyone, it would raise the prices and inflate the prices for everyone. And there are 39% of people that don't choose and don't want to take those extras. So we don't feel that we should be forcing people to take the extras. We're giving them choice. Some choose to book a seat, some choose to take a bag, some choose to take both. But we're offered choice, and that's the basis of our low-cost model is you can buy a ticket and have an under-the-seat bag included, and you will have an allocated seat when you board and when you check in online. We actually open check-in 30 days in advance, so people have that certainty of being able to know where they're sitting as well. So we offer all that, and in fact we were the first low-cost airline that introduced allocated seating, because I think we can all remember the days before that was introduced. So it's about giving people choice, and we don't want to force everyone to take the same things if that's not what they want to take.
Okay, but I mean, the under-seat bag causes no end of difficulties, doesn't it? Because it's so small. There's arguments at the gate about whether or not that's going to fit under and all of that. I mean, that's a reputational issue for you, I think, isn't it? And the airline industry generally, the budget airline industry, is notorious for these difficulties. And one of the things is clarity about these charges. So what are you doing? Because you deny that this is drip charging, and you talked earlier on about in the booking flow. You say that these charges, you come across them quite early on in the booking flow, but what are you doing to make it much more clear to the consumer what they're actually going to pay at the end of the day?
Yeah, I'll start with the clarification. It's not drip pricing, because drip pricing is where you start the booking and when you check out you've added lots of surcharges that you weren't intended to have. So that's been eradicated actually from the industry, certainly from a UK perspective. So you can't add a fuel surcharge or an admin charge or anything through the book process. So the price that you do see on the ticket at the beginning is the price you can pay when you check out at the end. So as an industry, we don't have drip pricing unlike other industries. In terms of giving people clarity, we do a lot of testing to make sure it's really straightforward and simple for people so they know what they are entitled to. Cabin bags are, in terms of the overhead locker space, is a constraint on all aircraft, as in not everyone can take a full-size cabin bag into the overhead locker. And before we actually introduced the ability to be able to manage the number of cabin bags on board in that way, we were offloading 7 million bags a year, which was then causing big issues on on-time performance. We know that the biggest driver of customer satisfaction is on-time performance. People want to get there on time, and therefore that was introduced to be able to manage that, and so people had certainty that they weren't then going to have to go and wait for their bag on the baggage belt when they hadn't wanted to. So that's part of the reason, and we make it really clear.
Just pressure on the clarity part then. So you're adamant that you can see a price at the start, and if you stick to your guns and you don't add any extras, you will pay that at the end of the day, and along the way the extras that you might opt for, you might not. Again, to be clear, that you're absolutely certain of that.
Yeah, exactly, 100%. And actually, what we've introduced in the booking flow, we do a lot of user testing to make it really accessible for people and really clear what they're entitled to and what they're choosing at each step. And then on the confirmation, it's really clear. But what we've now introduced on the booking flow is along the top of the website. As you go through the book journey, you can see the next step, what's coming up, and how far you are in that journey. So there's no kind of no mystical element about the booking journey. We're trying to make it really simple and transparent for people to pick the things that they do want and not pay for things they don't want.
Okay, thank you. And Rob, what does good practice look like across the industry in this sphere then? Because there is a reputational issue here with this idea that somehow you've hit the final button, confirm, and the price is suddenly 2, 3, 4, 5 times what you thought it was going to be.
Yeah, so I think it's really worth emphasising, as Sophie said, that we were engaged with the DMCC Act bill last year around drip pricing, but one of the, and aviation was talked about before that as something where this might happen, and we were categorically saying, this really isn't. The price you see is the price you will pay. You cannot add extra points at the end. So if you see a price, you can achieve that price. We did that when I travelled abroad a couple of weeks ago. And I would say for UK Airlines, it generally is the case that you will see a price, you might go on to the next page, and then you'll see where the sort of range of options are, what the added extras could be. And as I say, that is tailored to enable people to travel as cheaply as possible if they do not have the extra need, so that not everyone is paying for a service they don't ultimately need. So it is absolutely right that it needs to be transparent. And actually, we would say that the CAA does consumer satisfaction surveys every few months, and overall around 85% of people are satisfied with their last flight within the last 12 months, 5% dissatisfied. The booking process and comparing flights and options is actually it's actually higher than that. It's around 89%. So we're actually...
You look specifically at that then, because to the point from EasyJet that people are very concerned about on-time performance, but you're talking about the booking experience.
Yes. So from our perspective, we actually think that the system is working well and it is transparent, and generally people are finding it to be, you can compare prices and you can see what you are getting.
Okay, Antonia Vance.
Thank you very much, Chair. Many of us in this place are football fans and are looking forward to following our teams around Europe in the new season. Certainly people in the West Midlands will be looking forward to follow Villa, and my family are going to be following Crystal Palace. So often when it comes to following your football team abroad, suddenly you find on the day that the match is announced and the location of the match is announced and your team have made have qualified for that fixture, the prices of travel to that location goes up. And I'm thinking, for example, about what happens to Liverpool and Spurs fans in 2019 when suddenly the prices went from maybe 50 quid to get to Madrid on a low-cost airline to £750, £1,000. What have you learned from that experience? And wasn't it just taking advantage of football fans who didn't have any other choice but to follow their team? For Sophie.
Yeah, of course. And this is the challenge where you have something like a really peak event and you only have 2 or 3 flights going to a peak event. That demand pushes the system up because you've got so many people coming in to book in a very short space of time. So that's why, to your point, Madrid flights would typically be £50 because you normally have a booking curve that we can predict based on historical data. When you have a football match, it affects the system because the system says we've suddenly got all of this demand and therefore and on a very few number of flights and in fact the number.
Sophie, just walk us through blow by blow what happens between a game being confirmed in a place and a ticket hitting 750 quid. So just hour by hour, how does the price reach that point?
Yeah, so the system will react when...
What does that mean, the system?
Sorry, so the system will... Our revenue management system, the pricing system.
Revenue management system.
Yeah, will react when it sees a surge in demand. It equally reacts when it sees a depression that it doesn't then book in the way that, the flow we'd expect to have. So typically, our system, as I say, gets higher closer to departure. So about 60% of the time, the system puts the prices up. 40% of the time, the system actually brings the prices down because we're not seeing the demand coming in. If something comes in and suddenly a lot of people visit the website and are booking, back to Rob's earlier point, we have so many seats sitting in each price bracket. If lots of people come into the system at the same time, the revenue management system will react to that and will increase the prices.
So the cheap buckets, as it were, may sell out very, very quickly, and the speed with which they're selling has an impact on the last buckets, as it were, the price of which soar. Is that?
Yeah, exactly.
The mechanics?
Exactly, but the speed at which they are booking will make the system react more quickly because it's seeing that demand going within hours of a match being drawn. You see all of the seats going, and the system will react, and that's where the prices increase. I think it's worth emphasising our average price that we sold last year was £73. So these are real kind of one-offs when they happen. And as I say,
these are the ones we're worried about.
Yeah. But we have on those kind of maximums. So we do actually have a cap on the price and the maximum that a price can go up to. We're happy to share that with the committee. It's not something we disclose publicly, but we do have a cap. And I would say in terms of the amount of times we hit that cap, of the 100 million passengers we carried last year, 1 in a million would hit that cap. So it's very rare that those prices really do hit the peak, and it'll be the last 2 or 3 seats that will be at those sorts of prices on those events. And it's because you have so few seats on a compressed and such a concentrated travel period.
Vance, anything further?
And more broadly to the industry, what has your learning been about this? Is the practice of having a cap widespread across the industry? Is that how other operators work?
As a trade body, we don't actually get into the commercials of what airlines do individually. It's not our job. I understand. My understanding from talking to our airlines is that dynamic that's at play. So it is similar. Now, I think for us with the sort of overarching view, I mean, we would say, look, as Sophie said, these are rare events in an industry that has generally brought costs down a lot over the last few decades, and where overall the kind of margins for profit of airlines is around 4%. So airlines overall we want them to make a profit, we want them to be successful, and it's a hugely competitive market in which they are competing against other airlines, other airports, other destinations. So we think that the system as a whole is working well and offering good value, but obviously airlines will have their own way of managing those sort of peaky events.
Okay, Sarah Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to come back to this idea of the cap, which was sort of left hanging in the air. Because earlier this month, you were caught selling flights to the Europa League finals in Bilbao for £1,800. So clearly the cap is not 1,800 because that's definitely happened. So I just wondered, I had a look last night at how much it would be to charter a private jet. And interestingly, it looks like it's about £15,000 an hour, and Bilbao is 2 hours flight from London, so we can all go. And if there's 100 of us, then that makes it about £300 to fly one way. So return, it's not bad, 600 quid. Private jet, and I just wondered whether I missed the memo when you became like an exclusive luxury airline, and how that's justifiable.
Yeah, so the £1,800 would not reflect our price cap. It's well below that. So that wouldn't be for a single person one way for that fare. I'm not sure of that exact example, but I know that our price cap is significantly less.
£1,823 was the price that we clocked on the EasyJet website.
That wouldn't be for a single person one way. That might have been a return journey, but it wouldn't have been a single person one way.
Okay, it's pretty punchy even for a return.
As I say, these are 1 in a million people are paying those sorts of charges, and we carry 100 million people a year. Our average profit is £6.08 per passenger, and our average fares are £73. So these are very ad hoc. I mean, so that doesn't reflect the price cap that we have. We can confirm that and absolutely put that in writing, but that doesn't reflect, absolutely is not the price cap, I can tell you that.
And I guess my other question is, you also speak about the system as though it has a mind of its own that you can't control, a bit like Skynet. I just wondered whether or not there's any review of that, given that it's clearly creating some quite astronomical prices.
As I say, so the system we have a team of trading managers, they're called, that look at the system, and they're constantly monitoring and optimising the system and making sure, as I say, 60% of the time the system puts the prices up, 40% of the time the system puts the prices down. These are very, very few flights that we're talking about here versus the 1,827 we operate daily, pretty much. That was yesterday's number that we operated. We're talking about a handful of flights a year that have these sorts of prices in.
Thank you, Chair.
Morally, there is a limit to prices. I mean, even if the market could withstand a price that was, let's say, even higher than that number for that flight, as a firm, you think it would be wrong to just absolutely charge what you could get away with in the market?
I mean, we have that price cap for that reason, but I would also say we're in a very highly competitive market. So we operate probably on over 90% of our flights, 99% of our flights, we're operating with another airline that's competing on the same route, because we operate all the popular big routes. So we're not the price setter in the market, and the customer has choice. I think that's the key thing to remember about airlines. As I say, there's 89 airlines that operate short haul in Europe and the UK, and I would say the majority of our routes have another option. So if we did start charging astronomical prices, then customers would choose to fly with somebody else. So, but we do have the price cap for a reason.
So your argument, I just want to make sure I'm clear about your argument. So your argument is in part the market will fix this, but actually you then went on to say we have got a price cap because as a business, I assume you have decided that actually there should be limits on the extremes of prices.
Yeah. Yes.
Both things are true.
Both things are true. It's very competitive, but we believe there should be a cap.
Perfect, thank you. Rupert Huck.
Hi both. You said that dissatisfaction rates are relatively low when you've done polling, but can you appreciate why, when comments like the one from the EasyJet CEO circulate that say things like the system can fill a plane in 6 seconds during peak booking, and that is completely consistent with demand-led models, can you see why the great British public reacts very badly to statements like that? Yeah,
so I mean, that example I believe would be when we first go on sale. So when we first go on sale with flights, people are there's pent-up demand. People want to book their next summer holiday, and they want to book it early because they know that booking earlier they'll get the best prices. So that's when we talk about you can fill an aircraft in 6 seconds, because people know, because it's been the same model for us for 30 years, but for the industry for 40 years, people know if you book early you get the best prices. And that's where that reference to the filling an aircraft in 6 seconds is normally when we're going on sale for the following summer, kind of September time. You will see a surge because lots of people want to book early to get those best prices. So that's what that relates to.
I mean, the polling we've seen, Opinium and then also YouGov, has sort of found that a lot of, and the qualitative comments too, say that fans describe it as shameless greed. I think the kind of things Antonio was talking about, it's just seen as milking fans dry. There's some polling that came out in the wake of the Oasis ticket scandal showed only 10% of consumers are anywhere vaguely positive towards this. Have we been looking at different polling to you?
Well, I think there's different examples in different industries. I would say the airline industry is very transparent about pricing and when you can get the best prices, and we don't see those levels of dissatisfaction within the airline industry in terms of booking. And as Rob mentioned, we see good levels of satisfaction in the book flow. And as I say, we're offering flights today for $29.99 for the same route that we operated 30 years ago for $29.99, and there's a lot of tax added to that now that we didn't have when we first launched. So we as an industry and as an airline are fighting to keep the prices as low as possible by being efficient. And certainly our average fare, as I say, last year sold was £73. So and that's across all flights and 100 million passengers.
We're just slightly running out of time, so maybe I could just wrap up, Sophie, with one last question, which is, do you think that there are the right controls on dynamic pricing in your industry? You've obviously taken a position about, for example, price caps. Might have a discussion about where those price caps sit, but as an industry, do you think the industry is in the right place on this, or that actually your competitors might need different rules of the game?
Yes, I think there is enough guidance in terms of the industry. I think it's a well-established industry in terms of dynamic pricing. It's not a new thing. I think it's key we keep being transparent with customers and we keep offering them choice, and that we don't suddenly start to introduce everything needs to be included, because then we're reducing choice. So, and I think as an industry, they're very, very well-established pricing mechanics. Okay.